Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you, Luke, for the intro and the invite. I'm interested in the discovery of completely novel medicines. So if I had to give this talk a title, it would be, how are we going to catalyze innovation using open access and public-private partnerships? So what I'll do in the next few minutes is, first of all, I'll share with you what I think is the problem, if you like, in society. I'll share with you what I think the problem is in terms of drug discovery, potentially inside the industry. I'll share with you a few comments as to why I think these problems exist. I'll then share with you what we've been doing, some of the impact that's had, and what we're now starting to do and the direction we're going, and then I'll sum up. So first of all, let's think of the societal perspective. And, we've had many comments about it this afternoon. Society, patients desperately, desperately need more novel medicines. We're not producing enough of them. We know all the figures. I mean, in the UK, we've talked about aging societies, but in the UK, in 2050, 27% of people will be over the age of 65. Now, for many of us, it's a little bit hard to imagine that 1 in 4 people walking down the street are going to be over the age of 65. And in Japan, that figure is close to 1 in 3. And the thing is, over the age of 65, the incidence of dementia goes up almost exponentially. The incidence of cardiovascular disease goes up exponentially. The incidence of cancer goes up exponentially. Then we've got diseases of modern living, if you like, diabetes, obesity, etc. In some parts of the world, we've almost got epidemics in some of these conditions, and we desperately need new treatments. The other challenge we've got is that when we have managed to deliver a new drug to the market, often it's frankly unaffordable. The example I give is Vertex 3 years ago got a new drug for cystic fibrosis. This drug only works in 4% of patients, and they're charging $300,000 a year. That's $800 a day. Who on earth can afford that? Then let's look at what's happening in drug discovery or in the industry. Frankly, the way we're doing R&D today, research and development, it is becoming unaffordable. It is unsustainable. Forbes did an analysis a couple of years ago where they looked at how much money each of these big pharma companies were spending over a finite period. And then they looked at how many drugs they actually launched in that finite period, divided one by the other, and came up with an average cost of a drug. AstraZeneca, the average cost was $12 billion. This is just unsustainable. Amgen were the best, they were $3.5 billion. Even $3.5 billion is unsustainable. Drug discovery, the way we're doing it, it is becoming unaffordable. The other problem is drug discovery is incredibly risky. So there was an analysis published earlier on this year in the cancer space. So they looked at, in 2003, there were 529 compounds in development for cancer. So they were either in phase 1 or phase 2 or phase 3. 529 compounds. They then looked to see 10 years later, so in May 2013, what had happened to those compounds. Well, out of 529, in 10 years, 45 had made it to the market. That's good. 95 were still in development, but 389 had been terminated. Imagine, we took 529 into the clinic and 389 were terminated. They looked to see if molecules got into phase 1, which are the initial studies we do in human volunteers, what's the probability that that molecule will make it to the market? The answer is 7%. Even when you get it into phase 1, there's less than 1 in 10 that's going to make it to the market. Then they looked at if a molecule reaches phase 3, which are the big registration studies, how many of those get to the market? And the answer was 33%. So even in phase 3, it's only 1 in 3 that makes it to the market. In the Alzheimer's space, in the past decade, there have been 13 large-scale clinical studies in Alzheimer's. Each of these studies cost several $100 million. One of the Lilly studies cost $750 million. 13 clinical studies in 10 years, and all 13 failed. We are not even close to having a treatment for Alzheimer's. And this is one disease, frankly, if we don't come up with a new treatment in the next 2 decades, that one disease is going to financially cripple many societies. So drug discovery is incredibly risky. It's also incredibly slow. Again, a paper that came out earlier on this year, they looked to see how long did it take between an idea, so a new target, a new protein is going to work in this particular cancer. How long did it take to take that target into the clinic, into phase 1? The answer was between 6 and 30 years, 30 years. So drug discovery, it's becoming unaffordable, it's too risky, and it's too slow. So why the reason? What's the reason for this? Why is it so difficult? And I would break those up into 2 categories. I think there are organizational challenges, and then there are scientific challenges. So the organizational challenges are, the way we're doing drug discovery, there is massive duplication. Most companies working on a particular disease area, they all work on the same few targets. They all work on the same few targets because everybody reads the same literature, everybody goes to the same conferences, and everybody talks to the same opinion leaders. So they spend 6, 7 years in parallel, in secret, coming up with their own molecule, their own proprietary molecule. And then the first time they take it into patients to see if it does anything, the failure rate is more than 90%. 1 out of 10 molecules makes it. Now, for any one company spending all that money over 6, 7 years, of course, it's a horrendous waste of money. It's a horrendous waste of people's careers. But when you think you've got 20 companies doing the same thing in parallel, that is a tragic waste of money, a tragic waste of careers, but it's actually a tragic waste of patience. Ladies and gentlemen, the way we're doing drug discovery today, we are exposing patients to molecules that other groups already know are destined for failure. It is ethically and morally wrong. So there's massive duplication, there's massive wastage. Also, I think one of the challenges in any private organization is that there's too much of a short-term focus. When something is difficult, cracking Alzheimer's, a new drug for Alzheimer's is going to take a long time. You need stability. My worry is that in the industry, there's too much chopping and changing. There isn't enough stability, and there's too much of a short-term focus. Those are the organizational challenges. Now let's think of the scientific challenges. Frankly, we do not understand human disease. We haven't got a clue what causes schizophrenia, what's causing depression in a particular individual. If we don't know what's causing it, how are we going to come up with new medicines? I was saying to Luke earlier on, 1949, we started prescribing lithium for bipolar disorder. 2014, we're still prescribing lithium for bipolar disorder. How much progress have we made? We do not understand disease. We also don't have good biomarkers for many diseases. I mean, we can't ask an Alzheimer's patient if their memory is better today than it was last week, or a depressed patient if they're less depressed today than they were last week. We need better biomarkers. We don't even understand how some existing drugs work. Paracetamol, acetaminophen, all of us have taken it. Probably 100 million patients all over the world took it today, and we do not know how paracetamol works. We do not know the molecular target. We use a lot of preclinical assays, and frankly, I believe that animal models do not predict clinical efficacy. I have seen so many things work beautifully in animal models, and we take them into the clinic and they don't do a thing. These are the scientific challenges. So what are we doing? What are we doing in response to this? Well, first of all, we've decided we're going to pool resources. So what we've managed to do is we've managed to get funding from 10 large pharmaceutical companies. Each of these companies has given us $8 million. We have $80 million of private funding. We also have a lot of public funding. So the Wellcome Trust in the UK have to date given to the Oxford lab £59 million. So we have all this private funding and we have all this public funding. And by pooling resources, we can share this risk. The second thing we're doing, everything we generate, all the data, all the reagents, all the tools, we make them freely available. We give them away to anybody in academia, anybody in biotech, and anybody in pharma, because we believe that's the best thing we can do to facilitate science and therefore facilitate drug discovery. We also make these reagents immediately available because that reduces duplication. And finally, what we do is we only work on completely novel genes or novel proteins. I'm not interested in working on things that there's 50 labs all over the world already working on. So we work on these novel genes, we generate novel reagents, and we make all of those freely available. So this is driving innovation. And of course, by making things freely available, you can imagine every academic who comes into my office wants to collaborate with us. They know I've got no secrets. I'll share all of our know-how, all of our expertise, all of our reagents. And frankly, that transparency is great for collaboration, it's great for science, and it's great for drug discovery. So we're now collaborating with more than 250 labs across the world. Some of the best academic labs all over the world. I don't pay anything for those collaborations. And those guys take our reagents, look at them in their assays, they publish. This is a way of crowdsourcing science. So that's what we're doing. Let me share with you some of the impact this has had. We're now getting biotech companies coming to us and saying, look, we've got this platform. We'd love to take your molecule and put it into this platform, and we can do a joint publication. They want to be on our publications because that's good PR for them. But they also see us as a conduit into these 10 pharmas. More recently, we've had contract research organizations come to us and say, we want to take your molecules and we want to convert them into clinical candidates. And then we'll sell them to Novartis and Roche and GSK, etc. And we said, well, that's fantastic, great. We want to facilitate science, we want to facilitate drug discovery. And now what we're doing going forward is we've decided to focus on some of these genetic hits that have come out of these large clinical genetic studies. And for those genetic hits, we're going to generate these proteins and structures and inhibitors and chemical starting points. And again, we'll make all of those freely available. What we're also doing is when we generate these inhibitors, we're now going to screen these inhibitors in primary human cells. I'm not interested in animal models, and I'm not interested in cell lines. One of the advantages of sitting in academia is that I can work with clinicians, I can work with patient groups, I can get patient material, and I can access patient databases. So we're getting human cells from healthy individuals and patients and testing these inhibitors. And I think that is a much better way to come up with new targets for drug discovery. The third thing we're doing is now we're going to take some of these completely novel ideas and we're going to generate clinical molecules and we're going to take them all the way into patients, but completely in the absence of IP. The reason we're going to take them into patients is because that's where target validation happens. That's where we find out if that target is going to do anything in patients. That's where we find out where the 9 in 10 is garbage and the 1 in 10 that's likely to do something. So rather than having 20 groups working on that same idea in parallel, in secret, and then 9 times out of 10 failing, what we're saying is let's pool our resources, let's share that risk, let's do that experiment once, let's do it well, let's identify that 1 in 10, and then industry can take that 1 in 10, generate a proprietary molecule, take it all the way to the market. It's good for industry, it's good for patients, and it's good for society. What we're now also doing is developing links with patient organizations. So when I generate an inhibitor, I want to give it, say, to the Huntington's Foundation, and Huntington's know who the best labs are all over the world working on Huntington's, and then they can give that molecule to all of those labs. Also, by working with the patient organizations, I can access more patient material, because I think that's a better way of coming up with new targets. The other thing we're doing is, you can imagine, we're generating all of these novel reagents, novel inhibitors, novel antibodies, etc., etc. We're giving them to this global network of 250 academic labs. These academic labs are generating lots of new biology. Now you take new tools and new biology and you put it together, and it's the starting point for a new biotech. So we've just got a load of funding in Oxford to set up a pre-incubator in Oxford where we want students and entrepreneurs to take some of these ideas, exploit them, commercialize them for the benefit of patients. So to sum up, I think secrecy and competition in the early phase of drug discovery is wasteful in terms of resource, it's wasteful in terms of careers, and importantly, it's wasteful in terms of patients. What we're doing is we're bringing together the best clinicians and the best innovators in academia with lots of pharmaceutical companies accessing their goal-focused research, their efficiency-driven platforms. We're bringing together patient organizations because these patient organizations have a laser-sharp focus on delivering a drug. They are absolutely obsessed. They have a sense of urgency to take a new molecule into patients quickly. We're working with these groups. We're working with regulators. The regulators, of course, you can imagine, they have seen all the data on all the Alzheimer's studies that have ever been done. There's no other academic on the planet or any other clinician on the planet that has seen the failure of those 13 clinical studies. Nobody has seen all of that data. But the regulators do have that data. So the regulators are part of this, and the regulators are part of this because this is a knowledge creation endeavor. This is not about me trying to make money, it's about me trying to generate new science to help industry generate new medicines for patients. So the regulators are actively involved, and it is an unprecedented interaction with the regulators. We're getting funding from public sources, charitable sources, and private sources. We're trying to work together to identify new targets, which industry will then take and convert into drugs for patients. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're doing is trying to create a completely new ecosystem which will deliver more novel medicines more quickly and more cheaply. Thank you very much.